Hello, welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Annette Young. A few days ago, Israel's Defence Minister Ehud Barak caused a storm when he suggested that Israel unilaterally impose the borders of a future Palestinian state. He's the most senior government official to suggest bypassing what is clearly a stagnant peace process. And not surprisingly, he came under fire from all sides of the political spectrum, including Palestinians, settlers and the right wing. Yet it's a sign of the growing number of people who are seeing bilateral negotiations as all but impossible and are now desperately seeking a new paradigm. Now, joining me today in the studio is Afif Safir, and the Deputy International Relations Director for the Palestinian Fatah Party. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure being with you.
First of all, is the two-state solution dead and buried?
You know, I come from a country and from Jerusalem where we grew accustomed to at least to have some previous experience in resurrection. So no, I remain always an optimist that Palestine will resurrect. The question is when, and I hope as soon as possible. But yeah, we are in a total deadlock, and we have seen a peace process, we've seen the breakthrough, we've seen the breakdown, and I believe the peace process can only be salvaged now by the intervention, dynamic and assertive, of the international community. So dead and buried, no. In a total deadlock, yes, it has become an unamusing farce. And I believe the last position floated by Mr. Barak is one of those Israeli attempts to bypass their obligations in the peace process. Even during the George Bush Condoleezza Rice years, the sentence about the purpose of the peace process was to end the occupation that has started in '67, while the Israeli behavior is how to accaparate and acquire as much of our geography as possible without our demography.
What would a unilateral declaration mean for the Palestinians? What would it mean on the ground?
Absolutely nothing, except that the Israelis will give us semi-control of 50% of the West Bank and have total freedom for themselves in creating and multiplying accomplished facts through the expansion of the illegal settlements in East Jerusalem and beyond in the remaining 50%. And I believe it will be a devastating blow to any hope or perception of hope, hence the need for the international community to step in.
And as you say, the peace process is well and truly stuck, and it seems like Washington has just thrown its hands up in the air and walked away from it all.
Well, I never looked at international realities as a static phenomenon. We live in a history that is always dynamic. History is always in the making. The question, is it positive history or negative history? And I believe that Washington has been lamentable the last 4 years for a variety of reasons, even though President Obama has had 4 confrontations of will with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who lost them all, unfortunately, and Netanyahu behaves and believes that he's stronger than Obama in Washington itself because of the political establishment in America which behaves in a very undignified manner. You know, there is a joke which is very revealing and not that funny, that why doesn't Israel want to be the 51st state of the United States? It's because then they will have to satisfy themselves with only 2 senators. Now they believe they can take 90 for granted. That's the problem of Obama. But I believe once we have the American presidential elections behind us, maybe the occupant of the White House will be freed and liberated from the pressures of that pro-Israeli lobby, which I call the pro-Israeli Inquisition, and might have no more the feeling of the need to torpedo American foreign policy in the United Nations, because what we believe in and what we have submitted to the UN is a condensed version of all the American positions taken from '67 onwards. Yet that was the policy that the American delegate torpedoed, the condensed version of American foreign policy.
And was that effort to go to the UN General Assembly and to seek statehood a waste of time?
Not at all, and I believe that we have been now to the Security Council. I believe we should decouple the issue of the recognition of Palestinian statehood from the issue of admission to the UN. For the admission to the UN, we need the unanimous consent of the Security Council, and the Americans have the capacity of torpedoing it by the veto. But on the issue of the recognition of the desirability and the necessity of a Palestinian state, the General Assembly is enough, and I believe we can mobilize over 180 votes in favor. That's my recommendation, to go back to the General Assembly for the acceptance,
And
recognition of statehood, and to the General Assembly after the American election.
But is that being accepted by other members of Fatah Party? Because that was something that was...
It's an internal debate for the moment. And anyway, everybody knows that nothing serious in diplomacy will happen before the 6th of November. So in the meantime, I believe, one, we will be putting our house in order. And as you know, there is a Fatah-Hamas dialogue that for once now is seen as very promising. And I believe we are moving towards reconciliation, a government of technocrats and independents enjoying the support of all factions, the preparation for elections, presidential, legislative, and municipal, and all these are positive things that will be done during those months of stagnant diplomacy.
I want to come back to that reconciliation
Yes,
process in a
Yes,
moment,
please.
but just coming back to the Palestinian Authority itself, I mean, there are many in the West Bank who believe that the Palestinian Authority is not doing enough. Of course, Fatah is the body that controls the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and let me just remind the viewer that Hamas, the Islamist group, controls Gaza. That there are many, however, in the West Bank who feel that the Palestinian Authority is stuck in a rut, that it's not doing more in order to bring about a two-state solution.
There is always room for improvement, and Helmut Schmidt used to say the biggest room on earth is the room for improvement. Yet I believe that today, for example, the orientations adopted by the national movement as a whole to adopt popular non-violent struggle is an important evolution that maybe commentators like yourself did not attribute enough importance to it. Today, it would be generalized as a means and as a tools of expression and combat against an unacceptable, inadmissible reality, popular, mass, non-violent struggle. It's being used on a daily basis. Unfortunately, many journalists might not find it sufficiently sexy and is not giving it the media coverage it deserves, but this is what's taking place. The generalization and the refinement of popular non-violence. Number two, putting the house in order. Reconciliation with Hamas, the two geographic entities of the future Palestinian state, repairing a fractured political system, and re-legitimizing all institutions through the variety of elections I mentioned. This is another important task that will be undertaken in the coming weeks. I believe then we will wait for the international community, and here let me tell you, I believe Europe should be more assertive.
Okay, but coming back to that reconciliation process, it's been extremely fraught. There have been a series of meetings. Hamas was very angry that President Mahmoud Abbas himself, Fatah, had gone ahead and appointed a cabinet.
I think one should not consider that as the casus belli, you know.
I mean,
the reconciliation process was taking more time than we were expecting. The previous government had several persons who had resigned. It needed to be rehauled and updated, but it will resign immediately as the moment is ripe for reconciliation. So that's not a problem.
Do you really believe the two sides can bridge their differences?
Of course, but there is no reason. And my guarantee is mainly Palestinian public opinion. We have one of the most sophisticated public opinions in the world and in the Arab world. And our public opinion, which I encourage to be even more demanding vis-à-vis the performance of the political class and the political establishment, has made any faction that was perceived as reluctant to reconciliation pay a price. We have seen certain political forces that I will not name see their popularity ratings drop because they were seen as obstructionist and otherwise. So my guarantee, the pressure of public opinion on both sides to reconcile.
Finally, has the Arab Spring meant that the Palestinian cause has been well and truly forgotten?
No, these are simplifications by commentators that have to fill 24 hours a day of news and non-news. If some ask us, when is the Palestinian Spring? And I always answer, we are not going to be imitators. We have been initiators from our first intifada onward. So, no, I believe it has proven the emergence of public opinion in the Arab world as an important actor. We will see more national dignity in the conduct of leaders in their dealings with international players. And I I'm encouraged by that. Some ask me, for example, handling the crisis in Syria, will it not be a distraction? I've always believed that in international relations, the international community can handle more than one crisis at the same time. Only former President Ford could not walk and chew a chewing gum at the same time.
But it certainly has an impact, doesn't it, on the Palestinians? I mean, for instance, the Muslim Brotherhood gaining power, or, you know, who are much closer to Hamas than they are traditionally to Fatah. What does that do for the dynamic?
No, first of all, you will be surprised. The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and by the way, I'm a Christian of the Arab world, a Palestinian Christian, and a very proud one. I'm not annoyed and disturbed by the emergence of political Islam as a legitimate actor in the political system. They are part of society. They are part of the political culture of the country. And I believe they are not monolithic. They have modernist schools, democratic schools within them. And yes, they have regressive schools of thought that don't accept pluralism, diversity, etc. I always say I'm a Democrat. What I want in the Arab world and in Palestine is constitutional pluralism, the rule of the majority, the respect for the minority, and that the last election is not the last election. Now, Hamas is growing increasingly aware that, yes, the regime that was toppled in Egypt was 30 years old, but the state in Egypt is 7,000 years old. So Muslim Brotherhood in decisive role, because we don't know who would be elected and we are neutral in those elections, Muslim Brotherhood as an important actor in the Egyptian political system has responsibilities and considerations that maybe some naive Hamas leaders some months ago did not factor in. I feel comfortable with Egyptian society, and we will always interact with the Egyptian leadership elected in the coming election. And I believe for Egypt, Palestine is part of their national security, part of their national interest. And, you know, we as Palestinian society, we breathe towards our Arab hinterland through two lungs, from Gaza to Egypt, the West Bank, Jordan. Hence the need for intense and intimate coordination.
Afia Safir, I know that we probably could continue this discussion for much longer, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you so much for being with us today. And that's it for this edition of the Frans van Katr interview. Stay tuned for more news and headlines, which are coming up very shortly.